All right, guys, I thought we'd take a look at the internet weather for this week. This is the top 10 most probe ports. This is just based on sheer volume of scanning activity. And, you know, a lot of common cast of characters in here. We have the HTTPS port at the number 1. David actually covered the VMware vCenter server has a vulnerability. A lot of them listen on port 443, could be related. But, you know, a lot of things on the internet also listen on this port. So the majority of the internet, as a matter of fact. So it could be just, you know, scanning for other types of things as well, listening on HTTPS. Telnet, 23 TCP, very common. IoT type devices are still out there in large numbers listening on the Telnet service, and a lot of them have, you know, weak or default password settings in a lot of cases, so there's a lot of scanning on that. Mirai became infamously famous because of its, you know, aggressive nature of scanning and taking over devices listening on Telnet in the early days. 81 TCP is frequently, it's an alternate HTTP port. Frequently, we see a lot of scanning on this for the go-ahead web server, which has a actually more than one vulnerability, which is in a lot of embedded devices. Notably, a lot of the security camera DVRs use the go-ahead web server as a kind of back-end web server for their, you know, GUI that they present. So I think a lot of that might be related to that as well. 22 TCP is SSH. 6379 TCP is escaping me. Oh, no, it's Redis. So this is the Redis. It's like a caching database server. We've seen an uptick on scanning on this actually over the past couple of months, I think. So that's another one. If you run Redis servers, that's REDIS. That's one that you'd want to take note of. And then 2375 and 2376 are ones that we haven't really seen. I think it was in the report last week, maybe for the past couple of weeks, but I don't think it's, I think it's a relatively newcomer to the top 10. And this is related to Docker, so we'll take a closer look at that as well. And then another one that actually went up really high last week, and it's actually, it was probably in the 1 or 2 position. It's come down 9 positions to the, you know, number 10 position is the GRE, Generic Routing Encapsulation Protocol, which is basically for kind of standing up kind of like a VPN between endpoints, so to speak, or tunneled connections. So, so we'll take a closer look at that one as well. So this is the most sources probing. A lot of common cast of characters we see here all the time. So you've got your Microsoft file sharing, 445 TCP server message block type traffic. This is always up in the, you know, top 10. Again, Telnet, SSH. The number 4 position, 8728 and 8291, are both related to MikroTik. So MikroTik is a very popular home router, and they have some vulnerabilities. There's more than one, I believe. So there's a lot of scanning that goes on with respect to those. 8080 and 80 are web services. There's a lot of you know, middleware applications like Tomcat and other things like that that listen on port 8080. So that could be related to that. You've got your Microsoft SQL Server at 1433. And then 5555 TCP is the Android debug bridge, which we've, you know, seen probably for the past several years, a lot of continued scanning against this port. But nothing that we really haven't talked about in previous shows on this chart. So we're going to focus in on some of those other ones that I mentioned earlier. So 2375 and 2376 are related to Docker. And you can see we've always had, this is a 90-day chart. You can see we've had kind of a regular noise floor, so to speak. But around, let's say May, somewhere around the middle of May, tail of May timeframe, maybe the 20th, we started to see, you know, an uptick in activity in terms of scanning going on here. And on both of these ports, so they're both related. The 2375 TCP is the HTTP port, and then 2376 is supposed to be the HTTPS version, the encrypted version of that. So we can see that there's a lot of, you know, concert in these activities where they're kind of tied together. The one thing I don't really have any explanation for is why this dip is here. There's a pretty significant dip around maybe the 25th, I'm going to guess this is. I don't have an answer for that, if that's a data anomaly on our side or if they actually stopped scanning. So that's interesting, but probably bears a little more investigation to figure out what's going on there.
Yeah, I know on the
go ahead, Jeff.
Oh yeah, I was saying I know
Yeah.
I think just early this morning or late yesterday there was I think a talk of some Kubernetes type possible attack going on. So I'm wondering if maybe I know it's Kubernetes not Docker, but maybe they're trying to scan for the same thing. I mean, it just came out, so it's probably fairly new, but maybe it's a pretense to additional attacks to see what type of cluster container software is vulnerable per se. So yeah.
Right.
Maybe,
right.
yeah.
And
So,
I'm not a super expert on Docker. I've used it a little bit,
right.
but I did kind of read through some of the documentation on these ports. They do kind of have some best practices against advising not to expose these directly to the internet and whatnot, because you might be unintentionally exposing your Docker containers to people that shouldn't be able to access them. So I suspect that's probably what somebody's looking for here is, either insecure or poorly protected Docker containers that are exposing this Docker API interface. And like you said, probably similar to what they're doing with Kubernetes as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's a vulnerability they're looking for, but, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I might have some scan probes, so we can take a look here as well. So in terms of the scan probes that we see on this port, you can see the vast majority of it by a large margin. This is like the top 20 countries scanning for this port is all coming from China. So the majority of this scanning activity is all sourcing from China. And then Iran, Vietnam, US, Singapore, Netherlands kind of round out the bottom 5 or 6 here. And then the others tail off, being invisible as compared to the large majority here in China. So most of it is sourcing from there. I did take a look in our honeypot. So we have kind of a passive honeypot that just sits and watches to see who tries to connect to each port and what they try to say. So you can see, on this, this is the port 2375. I see that they're doing a get version 116/version, which is a command to go, I guess, get the version from the Docker container if it will respond. So this is probably just a kind of connectivity test. It's kind of saying, hello, are you a Docker container? And if it is, it may respond with the correct answer, of some sort of version info. And then they might do something from that point forward. And then in lesser numbers, I saw this ping command also being sent, which I assume is probably a similar type of function just to see, are you a real Docker container? If so, it will give a specific response, and if not, it won't. And then on the 2376, interestingly, for whatever reason, I guess it downsteps to be HTTP, even though this is supposed to be HTTPS, but the client must have figured out that this guy's only talking to me in HTTP because that's how our honeypot works, and it does the same query here. So, and in large numbers also from China. So all these IPs I list here are actually real source probes, that had hit our honeypot. And these are all from yesterday as well at various times, but I just grabbed a couple of samples so people could, maybe look in their own environments and see if they're seeing similar activity. And then the other one that I wish I had a little more time this morning to research, and I'll probably want to go back and look at this. I think Ganesh maybe was on the show last week, talked about this a little bit, but we're seeing a lot of scanning on the GRE protocol. And as I mentioned, it's a tunneling protocol that you would use to kind of establish like point-to-point or virtualized networks on top of networks kind of thing. I know a lot of, small businesses might overlay GRE tunnels on top of, in order to kind of like set up their infrastructure. If you have a lot of stores, maybe I have like 15 stores and I have a headquarters building, but I use AT&T service or whatever as the internet. I'll have my routers use GRE tunneling to kind of make a virtual private circuit between my store and headquarters, and all the stores are kind of on a little private network. So it's like a way of overlaying a network on top of a network. In any event, when we look at this, we don't see a lot of, this is a 60-day shot. There's not a lot of scanning otherwise, but you can see around May 31st here, it really shot up. And we saw roughly 4,000 scan sources per hour all of a sudden start scanning this. And then it has this sawtooth waveform of a decay, which is really indicative to me. Whenever I see this, it's usually there's a botnet controller in play. So somebody told a whole bunch of devices all at once, please start scanning. And then the ones that have really fast internet access, they finish first. And the ones that don't finish slower. So you get this kind of decay because of that, as the really slow ones finish later than the ones that have really good internet access. In terms, when I say that, I mean the bots that are in that botnet. So this is probably a good exercise for us to go look at what are these scan sources. I noticed a lot of them are in the U.S. on a lot of, well-known consumer ISP services. So, it's probably home type devices, maybe, some type of botnet, either on embedded hardware or something of that nature, at consumer endpoints. So this probably bears a little more investigation to figure out, is there some specific botnet in control here? And then why is the question.
Why?
Like, what's so great about scanning for Protocol 47? Because it's not really, it has been used in DDoS attacks, but only in flood attacks. It has no reflection capability like you would get with DNS reflection. So even if I was scanning for it and I found like a list of things that are valid GRE endpoints that are going to answer me, it's not like I can use it for reflection, but maybe they're going to try to brute force into it. I don't know. I'm not sure what the gain is here in terms of looking for this, but somebody's clearly interested. In this case, they're actually scanning. And you can see when we have some profiling information, which I didn't put in our chart here, but you can see that the bots or the endpoints that are engaged in this scanning, that they will scan from like 1.1.1.1 all the way up to not 255, but you know what I mean. They scan the entire IP4 address space. So, they're up to something. It's not like a directed attack against one particular thing. They're looking for, endpoints that will answer. So there's probably more to the story. And I think, like I said, it only really kicked up within the past, few days here. So it'd be interesting to see if this continues, because this is pretty atypical. We don't normally see this protocol being scanned or really used in a malicious way. So I think there's another shoe to drop.